Okay, I think we'll get started. Good evening. It is the May 17th Board Finance Committee meeting, and our purpose is to discuss student services and special education budgets. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Coe.
Good evening, everyone. This is the fourth and final of our in-depth presentations of important budget topics for the year. Tonight we'll be talking about student services and special education, and as the evening unfolds, you'll see a number of things that I think that some members of the community are aware of and others may not be. This is a full compendium of services that we offer to students. And when it comes to special education, from the ages of 3 years old to 21 years old is the responsibility of the school district. You'll also hear about our gifted education program, and you'll see why we think it's, in total, one of the best programs statewide. So with that, I turn it over to Kimberly Frazier.
Good evening. I thank you first for this opportunity. I actually am always very excited to talk about our department and the work that we do. So I am very excited to be here with you this evening. I do want to take a moment. This slide shows our administrative team in student services, and I have some of my administrative team here with me this evening, so I do want to take an opportunity to introduce them and thank them as always for their continued support. We have with us Ms. Deb Libowicki, who is our lead supervisor of special education, and she oversees specifically as well early intervention and grades K through 3. Ms. Terry Quinlan, who is our lead supervisor of school health and student safety, and Dr. Purcell Whitaker, who is our lead supervisor of clinical services and gifted education. And as you can see, the scope of work that happens within our department is pretty wide. The work that our team does impacts every student every day. And I listed for you to give you that overview so that people can really understand the breadth of the work that our team does. And here you see from our nurses to our teachers, our paraprofessional staff, our clinical team with psychologists and social workers, our related service providers. We are really a large team providing a lot of services for students. And again, it does impact each of our students. And we take very seriously the work that we do. It's our responsibility to ensure that the rights of our students are protected and, really specifically that students, regardless of ability or disability, have the right to access, have the right to equal opportunity as their, non-disabled peers. And we work really hard to ensure that that takes place. And as you see throughout this presentation, I talk a lot about those specialized supports that we provide for students, and really it is with that mindset of ensuring that there's equal access, because students have that right, the right to access their education, the right to participate in the extracurriculars like their peers. And so there's a lot of work that we do that is really about just that. As I go through the presentation, the specialized supports are provided for students in various ways. You'll see reference to 504 plans, GIEPs, and IEPs. The 504 plans are accommodation plans for students who need accommodations to be able to access. An IEP is an individualized education plan for students with a disability who require special education services. And a GIEP is a gifted individualized education plan for students who are in need of gifted services. And I can talk a little bit more about each, but those are examples of the specialized plans that support our students. And you can see the amount of people on our team that it takes to do that work. This is a department overview. So in student services, we have our specific different areas within our department. And this just gives you a general overview about where the expenditures fall. So you can see proportionally that the largest portion of the budget that falls under my direct supervision goes to special education. And then you can see the breakdown with our counseling services, our clinical services, and our health services. And the presentation is designed to talk about each individually to give you a little more in-depth look at each individual part of our department. I do want to make a note here that gifted education costs are included in the special education number, so that $47,375,000 includes gifted services. But I have within the presentation broken gifted out so that we could look at that more specifically.
Kim, just quickly, counseling is not necessarily just the counseling for special needs students, right?
Correct.
This is all counseling?
Correct. Same for health services.
Does this include personnel costs or just costs?
Personnel.
I'm sorry. Does this include personnel costs?
It does.
I apologize.
Total cost. And then what I've done for each of our groups, this will show you that I've shown you what our personnel costs are and then our other expenditures, so you can see the cost breakdown. Because for the majority of our individual components of our department, the personnel costs do make up the primary expense. So I'm going to start with our health services. We do currently have 13 and a half full-time certified school nurses. We have 15.4 full-time staff nurses. Staff nurses are about half the cost of what a certified school nurse is, but there are responsibilities that require the certified school nurse. And our nurses provide health services to over 13,000 students. Those 13,000 students in 10 of our schools, and we're responsible for providing services in 20 non-public schools. So it's mandated by the state that we provide some services to non-public, and as you know, our community has a large number of non-public schools within our district bounds. And so we're required to provide varying level of supports for those particular schools. Those expenses are included within the numbers that you see. Our health services team develops and manages over 450 medical 504 plans. That 504 plan that I referenced earlier is an individualized plan for students who have a medical condition that impacts their ability to access within the educational setting. So it might be diabetes, a seizure disorder, life-threatening allergies, where they need a specialized plan so that our nursing staff knows how to support them and that our staff knows how to respond in the event of an emergency. So from K to 12, we have over 450 of those individualized plans. The health services team also develops emergency care plans for students who have IEPs and 504s as well. We have over 700 students with an emergency care plan. They play a critical role in many of our teams in the district, bringing their expertise and their support. We have a school-age transition team, which works with our students who are transitioning to school-age services from early intervention. And so we have a team that helps to support with that the transition. Those are students who are receiving special education services through the IU. They are important on our student assistance program. Our SAP teams work with supporting students who have drug and alcohol issues. They support our achievement teams who are working closely to provide interventions for any student who's experiencing difficulty within the educational setting, and they're critical team members on IEP and 504 teams. They provide a high level and skilled nursing procedures that really does allow our students to remain in their home schools. These are some examples of the things that our nursing staff is doing on a daily basis. We are responsible for providing specific nursing services as required by IEPs and 504 plans. And that includes, now go back to what I mentioned about access. Students with disabilities have to be provided with opportunities to participate in the same activities as their non-disabled peers. Our responsibility as a district is to ensure that the supports and accommodations are in place to enable them to do so. For some of our students with nursing needs, that means that they do need that additional support on field trips. They might need support for before and after school activities. We need to supply nurses for our summer programs. Our community-based instruction and work programs are for our special education students who are receiving services in the age group of 18 to 21, where those students are working on independent living skills, on work experience opportunities, based on what their goals are for transition to life after high school. And we do have some students who, because of their medical needs, require a one-to-one nurse with them. And sometimes we need to have those nurses with students when they're being transported on buses. And our health services team does an excellent job of doing district and community level health promotion, mass immunization programs, our wellness council, we have a parent speaker series, the work that we've done on the Gender Expansive and Transgender Committee. The team is really committed to working closely with parents and community, with providing information and really helping our families know how they can also best support their children at home. They provide trainings to our district staff. There's some examples of trainings that they provide on an annual basis to our teams. They also provide very specific individualized training if a student has a very specialized need. They're responsible for reviewing all mandated immunizations, physical exam, and health records that are required per PA school code and the Department of Health mandates. They're responsible for reviewing all that and making sure that students have what they need before they start school. And within our budget is, of course, then supplies. First aid supplies and screening equipment, CPR training supplies. So by way of example, our first aid supplies for the proposal for the 17-18 school year is $15,000 in standard supplies, and then there's some emergency supplies for around $5,000. So that gives you an idea of the cost of some of those supplies. The CPR training supplies are $5,400. So that's some of the costs associated with supplies with health services. We do also need to have a physician consultant. Our physician consultant is up to $35,000 a year, and that consultant provides mandated services for students. That consultant also provides our mandated screenings for our transportation department that's required by the Department of Transportation. They have pre-employment exams. They also consult with human resources and student services when there are any employee or student health issues. And we also do have to have a dental consultant on staff. That is at the price of $100 an hour. It is mandated that there are dental exams in grades kindergarten, grade 1, 3, and 7, and so we use a dental consultant to help with that work. Some of the key influences that impact the budget for health services, you heard I did mention it a lot as I was speaking. The Department of Health and the Pennsylvania School Code really dictate a lot of what we have to provide for students. And so that has an impact on the budget that the district doesn't have control over. We are just following through with what we're mandated to do. The other key influence are required services for students with disabilities. Again, it is that they require that service to be able to access and participate meaningfully, we're responsible for providing it. And I did reference as well the services that we're responsible for providing to non-public schools and the impact that that has on our overall budget. For our clinical services, you can again see the breakdown in total expenditures between salaries and our other expenditures. Our clinical team consists of our school psychologists. We do have 11 school psychologists total. We have 1 full-time school psychologist in each building, and we have an additional school psychologist that helps to support the work in the buildings and also works with our out-of-district cases that we need to do evaluations for. We have school social workers. We have 4 that support K-12, and our mental health counselors, and we have 3 mental health counselors as part of our team. This team provides a critical service in terms of crisis intervention. So unfortunately, our students do experience crisis, and that can look anything from at the elementary level, a student who's really having difficulty one day regulating their emotions and regulating their behavior, and our clinical team has to step in and work with that student to get them to a better place with their behavior or emotionally, to students who are struggling with anxiety and depression. And we have students who have suicidal ideation and are making threats of possible harm to themselves. Our clinical team is highly trained to step into those situations, assess the student, assess for risk, help to provide support to those students in the middle of that crisis, and then to really work closely with the families on recommendations for follow-up support. So it's a critical role that our teams play. The evaluation work that we do is an important part of the work of our school psychologists, and I will talk a little bit more in detail about that. With the evaluations, an important piece that we're again mandated to do, the district has what we call a child find responsibility. So we are required to identify any students ages 3 to 21 that live in the district that are eligible for special education services, and we're responsible for identifying those students and then offering a program. So with that impacts this evaluation piece. So if families come and request an evaluation, we're responsible for responding to that request. So I'll tie it also back to the non-public piece. If parents make a decision to enroll their children in a non-public school, they still have the right to come to the district and say, we would like you to evaluate for suspected disability, and the district is obligated to do that. So it's another area where we're not just supporting the students in our buildings. They participate in the same teams I described as for our health services team, very critical members of those teams, really bringing their expertise to the table in each of those situations. And this team really works to support families with access to community-based services, and how do we help families connect with what's available, and how can we help them navigate the system when their child is struggling or they need additional support. The evaluations is a main component of what particularly our school psychologists do, and so I wanted to give you a snapshot so you could understand the magnitude of what that means for the district. This is from 15-16, so this is the last full calendar year that we have of data. Approximately 10% of the school-age population was evaluated in the 15-16 school year. So what that means is that there was almost 800 evaluations that occurred that the team had to go through that process. And that includes initial evaluations. So the initial evaluation is looking at initial eligibility for services. Does the child have a disability? And if so, do they require specially designed instruction? And then there's reevaluations that also have to take place. Per federal regulations and PA school code, we're required to reevaluate students who are currently receiving services. So at a minimum, every 3 years, students who are identified must be reevaluated, with the exception of students who are intellectually disabled. If a student is intellectually disabled, we are responsible for reevaluating them every 2 years. So it's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. It's a very important part of the process, but there is a lot of time that's expended towards that. Last year, we had 77 students that are attending non-public schools that were requested evaluations and were completed by the district. This is a little lower than years past. We at sometimes go up all to 100. Some years we've reached, but in 15-16, it was 77 students. We've also been committed to universal screening for giftedness, and as you know from other presentations, we have been screening all students in 1st and 2nd grade. From that screening that we're doing, the teams receive those screening results, and the achievement teams review them and make a determination as to which students should move forward to a full evaluation. Last year, 125 students moved forward to that full evaluation. The number of evaluations completed by our team for gifted services only was 73. And to give you an idea of what does that really mean for our school psychologists, a gifted evaluation with just the evaluation itself, observing the student, testing the student, talking with the parent and the team, writing the report, a psychologist can estimate that that takes about 5 hours of time, so about a day's worth of work just for that piece, and I'm not counting the time that they spend in meetings with parents and helping teams develop plans. For our evaluations that are looking for suspected disabilities, those could take 2 to 3 full days of work on the part of the psychologist in terms of the work that needs to get completed for those to do a comprehensive evaluation. We also evaluate our students who are transitioning to us from early intervention. Our early intervention transition to school age services team completes evaluations. Last year, we did 38 of those. We do often have to rely on additional hours of time beyond our psychologist's work time to be able to support with the work that needs to be done for the evaluations. In the summer of 2016 alone, we had an additional 753 hours that we had to pay psychologists to do work that needed to be completed. Our psychologists currently are 10 months, and so we do utilize the summer to help with that work. Evaluation timelines stop in the summer, so it does, but we do continue to do evaluations as we're able to in the summer to keep up with the work. Some key influences with our clinical services budget. Our staff is incredibly important, as it is for every department. With our clinical team, the expertise that they bring into their work is critically important. Our school psychologists are all doctoral level psychologists with many years of experience and a vast range of experience, and that's really important to the work that we do. Federal and state mandates that I mentioned definitely drive the budget. The child find obligations that I explained, some of those evaluation and reevaluation requirements, and then the universal screening for gifted, because again, that's all hours of support from our team. For our counseling, you can see the breakdown. The largest part of our counseling budget is salary and personnel costs. We do have school counselors in every school. We have one college access counselor who supports both of our high schools and really focuses on supporting families and students with those post-secondary goals and looking at different colleges and what is best suits a family and financial aspects to it. She really is an expert in what colleges offer. In terms of school counselors, we currently have 25.5 counselors, K to 12, supporting our students. We have a really comprehensive counseling program that systematically addresses academic, career, and personal development. Rich Marta spent a lot of time with the team developing a curriculum that's developmentally appropriate, that the counselors use to work with students. And by way of some examples with that, at the elementary level, they specifically work on empathy building and problem solving and impulse control. At our middle level, they're working on understanding the cycle of bullying. They're talking about sexual harassment. They're working on some self-discovery through the work that they do, looking at their learning styles and how that impacts them in the classroom and understanding that, and starting to, at the middle level, get a sense of what are your areas of interest and what you might want to consider pursuing. At the high school level, they spend time also doing that self-discovery. What are your areas of interest? What colleges match that area of interest? Being purposeful in course selection, looking at college readiness skills, budgeting, independent living. So our counselors are doing all of that. An important component to that work also at the secondary level is our use of Naviance. Naviance is a computer-based program that provides a wide range of those aspects with learning styles and with their interest inventories. It's also a way for them to work on their essays for colleges. So the Naviance has been a great program. As an example, the cost of the Naviance program is $17,500 for the year for all of our students. And the team is really working on assisting students with exploring, planning, and realizing their individual interests, abilities, and goals. At the high school level, there is academic advisement becomes much more detailed. Our counselors working with students and families, looking at their data, collaborating with teachers, helping them to define their educational plans and making sure students are selecting the right courses that put them on that track, advising them on how to access resources and where to find things as they move forward. There's time spent with personal and social counseling, stress management, conflict resolution, substance abuse counseling, grief counseling, any services that our high school students might need. And then, of course, the career and college counseling, really looking at what their interests are and how we can support with that. Within the counseling budget is also costs related to the district's testing program. So the material costs for some of our universal screening is included within here. The cost for our ERB in 4th grade, the materials and scoring is included within here, and the cost for PSATs. To give you an idea, the cost for the PSATs for the district is around $17,000. The cost for the ERB testing is around $14,500, to give you an idea of those costs. They also provide a lot of parent training and support. They're similar to health services. There's a lot of evening training opportunities for families. We have a parent lending resource library so that parents can have access to some resources that might be supportive of them. And our team works hard with that. And then our counselors also serve as 504 case managers. So for students whose 504s are not just medically based, our counselors serve as the case manager and provide that level of oversight and support for that process. Total within the district to date, we have 815 504 plans. Which gives you an idea of the number of students who require that support. Another aspect within counseling that impacts the budget is the work that needs to be done in the summer, particularly at the secondary level, preparing schedules, making sure that new students coming in have everything in line for the first day, making sure that, that schedules are in line and students have what they need to have a smooth start to the start of the school year. Gifted education. Again, this is, you can see there is significantly the salary and personnel costs are the highest portion of this particular budget. The rest of our expenditures are maintained fairly low. The gifted services that we provide are required as per our PA School Code, Chapter 16. As I've mentioned in other presentations, there's no federal regulations for gifted education, but Pennsylvania has Chapter 16, which dictates what districts are required to provide. And as part of that, we're required to plan and develop and operate programs. We need to identify and evaluate gifted students. We need to provide a program that's based on their unique needs, not just you're gifted, here's some services. It's this is where your giftedness falls. You're gifted in language arts, you're a gifted math student, and we have to meet those unique needs based on their area of giftedness. And we have to ensure that that gifted education enables them to participate in an acceleration or enrichment programs or both as appropriate and receive those services that they need that's really according to their intellectual and academic abilities and needs. We currently have 19 gifted support teachers in the district. The total number of students receiving gifted services to date, 1,242. I did break out for you, included within that number, we have 104 students who are considered dually identified. Dually identified means that the student is eligible and receiving gifted services, but is also eligible and receiving special education services for their disability. So in those situations for those 104 students, the special education case manager serves as the primary case manager, and the gifted support teacher is a component of that, is a member of that team and supports that team. So within that 1,242, 104 of them also receive special education services. And in addition to the costs that we have for staffing, The key expenses on the other expenditures, really the universal screening, the materials and the evaluation support. And then the tools and resources to ensure consistency and practices across schools, really looking at making sure that our gifted support teachers have resources to be able to use, that they have ways of assessing where students are, and materials to provide an appropriate level of enrichment and support. And under Dr. Whitaker's leadership, really working to ensure that that's consistently across all of our schools what's available and accessible to our students. So special education, as you saw from an early slide, is the largest portion of the budgets that fall under me. You can see here the breakdown between the salaries and other expenditures. In this particular budget, you will note that the other expenditures are a little bit higher, and we'll talk about what some of those costs are. The special education team consists of our highly qualified special education teachers. Our special education teachers, we really look to hire teachers who are not just certified as special education teachers, but who also have a secondary certification, whether it's certified as an elementary education teacher or at the secondary level if they're certified as a math or an English teacher, because the importance of them also having the skills in terms of curriculum and the general education curriculum are very important to us. And so we do really look for those highly qualified special education teachers. Our related service providers. Related service providers include our speech and language therapists, our occupational therapists, physical therapists, our behavior supports, vision support, hearing support, orientation and mobility. That it demonstrates to you the vastness of our related services that are required and offered. And then also our paraprofessional support staff. So we have our instructional assistants. We have some instructional assistants who are required to be one-to-ones, that the students require dedicated adult support in order to be able to access their education. We have some behavior aides who are also paraprofessional staff, but have work with students that have some more intensive behavioral needs. And with that team, we also have job coaches. Currently, we have 2.5 job coaches to support the work experience opportunities that are provided for our secondary students, and particularly for our students ages 18 to 21. I think an important piece of this too is that with the highly qualified staff, I can't state that strongly enough how important it is with that highly qualified staff. And I'll remind, because I'm so proud of the team and the leadership of Deb and the other supervisors, when we went through our compliance monitoring and I shared those findings with you, if I can remind you that the compliance errors were so few that it was less than 1%. So out of their 2,046 checks of compliance, we were only noted as out of compliance on 4. And so it just speaks to the qualifications of the special education teachers and their team and the work that they do every day. Federal and state mandates really drive what we do in special education. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504 Rehabilitation Act, our Chapter 14 for PA School Code mandates what we're obligated to provide, and we have to adhere to that as we're developing programs for students. And most importantly, we know that those federal and state mandates are important and we adhere to them. But what is of most importance, and why I'm honored to be part of this district and honored to be part of this team, is the district's clear commitment to the inclusion of students with disabilities. I see it among staff, I see it on the board, I see it within our community. We are committed to including our students with disabilities to the very highest amount that we can. And that's a strong value and commitment on the part of the district, and we work really hard to do that. To help you understand the degree to which we do that, the students receiving special education services, we look at the amount of time that they spend in special education as opposed to the time they're in the general education setting. And we look at 3 different levels. So if you're at an itinerant level of service, you're included in the general education classroom for 80% or more of the time. Then you have supplemental, which is around the 40 to 79% of the time. And then anything below the 40% is considered full-time. Of the identified students in our district, 67% are included at the itinerant level, which means they're included at the highest level that we can provide with that 67%. I think that that's remarkable and speaks to our commitment to inclusion. And it does come with it our responsibility to ensure those appropriate supports so that our students can be included, and that is part of the cost that we incur. This is to give you a sense of the amount of students receiving services within the district. This is from our December 1 child count data, so you can see total student enrollment versus the total number of special education students. And important to know, we have 1,180 students currently receiving special education services. And each of those students is entitled to an individualized education plan. And that individualized plan is developed by their IEP teams, and those IEP teams consist of the parent, the student when appropriate, their special education teacher, regular education teacher, a building administrator, the school psychologist. Those teams at the building level are making individual decisions for each of those children. It is required that they meet at least one time every year, at least, and many of our teams meet more than that for each student. And at each of those meetings, the team is deciding what that student needs at that time to be able to access their education and to be able to make meaningful progress. And so those individualized decisions are happening on an ongoing basis. So as needs change, our supports change. And it's very individualized at the building level. So it does have budget implications in that you can't predict what your costs are going to be. We can't predict how a student's needs are going to change. We can't predict what supports are going to be required at any given time. And again, the ownership of that decision making, it rests back with that individual team for each student. For these numbers, to give you a sense of the students receiving services, 35% of identified students have a primary disability of specific learning disability. 19% have a primary disability of speech and language impairment. 17.5% have a primary disability of other health impairment. So that might be ADHD is an example of one that might be an other health impairment. 17% are identified with a primary disability of autism. That's an area that we have seen steadily increasing over time. 6.6% are emotionally disturbed. And then we have just over 2% as intellectually disabled. And I share that with you because I think it paints a picture of the students that we have and that we're providing services for. And we have, over time, developed our program based on the needs of the students that we have, really emphasizing like full continuum of services.
Can I just ask a clarification? This does not include students who are receiving 504. I mean,
Correct.
unless they're both, but the I think it was 800
Yes,
was the number of students aren't,
correct.
okay, I just wanted to
That's
make sure.
correct. 815. So students who have an IEP cannot also have a 504 because the components of the 504 are embedded within the IEP, and because the IEP also includes specially designed instruction, direct support through special education, goals that they're working on, it's actually a more developed plan for students. So those students are separate.
So what was the first number you gave for the specific learning?
35%. So some of the costs with our in-district program, to just give you an idea of where some of those other expenditures are coming in. So progress monitoring tools are a very important part of the work that our special education teachers do. Students within their IEPs have individualized goals, and the district's responsible for ensuring that students are making adequate progress towards those goals. And so we have to make sure that our teachers have tools that can help them appropriately monitor that progress. And so having those tools and consistent tools across our teams is really important. We currently are using 3 core progress monitoring tools. I'm naming them specifically because I want to give you an estimate of the cost of those. So we utilize GRADE, which is a reading group diagnostic reading, and the GMAID, which is math, the math equivalent, and Lmsb, which provide probes in math and reading. And the cost for that for the K to 12 is $30,000 to be able to utilize that for our students. So the progress monitoring piece is significant. Assistive technology. So again, along the lines with that access, some students do need technology to be able to help them to access the environment, to access the educational setting, to access the curriculum. We have some students who need assistive technology to be able to communicate. So they need it to be able to communicate their needs and their wants with their teams. And then it goes all the way to students who need it to be able, that might have some difficulty with expressive writing, and they need some assistive technology like a computer program to be able to help them to develop a comprehensive written assignment. Some of those that we utilize with the assistive technology, we have iPads at the elementary level that we use quite extensively. Some students have to have individualized iPads that we use as communication devices, and then we utilize the iPads within some of our special education classrooms as a resource and a tool. We spend approximately $60,000 on assistive technology at the elementary level. At the secondary level, the one-to-one helps at the high school because students who need laptops have that provided through the one-to-one initiative, but we do have some middle school students who need additional technology to be able to support them. And then it also includes, at the secondary level, again, an example are some of our programs that help students with the production of written work and the reading of material. So an example of that, Kurzweil is a program that supports student with written expression. Solo is another example of programming that we use. The Kurzweil, our cost for 17-18, we're projecting to be around $4,000 to give you an idea for the students that use it. The Solo around $6,500. Curricular resources come into play as well. So our special education teachers need resources to be able to address those needs as identified within the IEP. So some resources with math, reading, I know I hear it. Oh, is that it? Okay. So a large portion of our extra costs do come under curricular resources. So it's for that supplemental instruction that our special education teachers are providing. They work on remediation of skills. They also work on supplementing the general education curriculum so they can help students master those skills as well. Another example that goes along with this curricular resources, we are proposing for the 17-18 school year to add the PACE Lab to our high school program. The PACE Lab is a vocational assessment tool that allows students to participate in a variety of different work-related tasks. At the end of their participation in that, we're able to assess what things they were particularly strong at, what areas they were interested in. It helps us more clearly delineate where they might want to go in terms of work experience in the future. We had historically been using Montgomery County IU for that service. We have recommended that we purchase the materials and actually have our special education staff deliver that support. We have a teacher that is a relatively new teacher to our team who came to us already trained in how to administer it, so she can take over the lead on that. The materials to purchase that was $30,000 one-time fee, and then it'll be a $500 fee every year after that. We estimate that that will be a cost savings of at least $100,000 a year for the district by not needing to utilize Montgomery County Intermediate Unit for that support, plus the cost savings for transportation. And it makes the most sense for our students, because previously we were transporting them to participate. They missed instructional time while they were in transport. So here they can walk from the high school, go to that classroom, do that work, and they miss no more time than any other student between classes. So we're really excited about being able to do that. Behavioral supports makes up a good portion of our in-district program supports. We are a very inclusive school district, and along with that comes some students that have challenging behaviors that interfere with their learning, and they need a high level of support. We currently utilize behavior specialists. We have an independent contract, and we also work with Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. We have 2 behavior specialists through Montgomery County. The cost of that is $500 a day for behavior specialists. And then we also currently have a contracted support that equates to about 0.5 for additional support that's needed. And we use every bit of that support. It's a critical support that we provide that allows students to not just stay in their home schools or stay within the district schools, but also allows us to maximize their inclusion in general education. ESY is another large portion of our cost. ESY, which I should have spelled out, I apologize for that, is Extended School Year Services. Extended School Year Services is a decision that every IEP team makes for each student every year. Some students require continued programming beyond the typical school day, typical calendar year, in order to maintain progress on their goals. So Extended School Year Services are intended to maintain progress over breaks. So we look at what services do students require during the summer in order to maintain those skills. It is an expense for the district that does impact the budget. In 2016, we had 372 students who participated in in-district extended school year programs, and we had 253 students who participated in outside supports, which means the tutoring piece that we offer. And so that's 625 students receiving some type of extended support throughout the summer. So that does come at an expense to the district, but is, again, part of that, what's required for students. We also have some students who require an out-of-district placement. So even with our extensive continuum of services, we do have some students whose needs exceed what we can provide for within our district schools. And when that's the case, we're still responsible for ensuring that they're getting a free and appropriate public education. And so we have to find a program that can meet their needs. I show this information because I think it is important. We currently, to date, have 41 students who are placed in out-of-district programs. Our team is working really hard to continue to, as appropriate, bring students back or keep students in our home schools without having to go to placement. There are students that these 41 students need that level of service. They need that level of support. But we do try to keep students in their home school as much as possible. And you can see that over the years, we've significantly decreased the number of students that are requiring out-of-district placements. And I think that's a positive for our school team. And it does come down to the expansion of our programming, careful planning and supervision on the part of the supervisors. When students require out-of-district programming, we have tuition costs associated with that. The tuition costs vary depending upon the school that they end up going to. Some of our programs are as low as $21,000, $22,000. Can go all the way up to, I have some programs that students need that exceed $125,000. So the tuitions vary. And when a student is being placed out, you can't predict where the right program is going to be, when a student's going to need that out-of-district placement, and what's going to be required for that particular student. This is just to give you an example because I do think it's important to understand that the cost varies so much. This is just a snapshot of some of the schools that we have or have had students placed in. We have probably over 20 schools where we have students placed of that 41, and it gives you a range of what the costs are. So Mill Creek, as an example, is a school for secondary students that are struggling with emotional needs, need a smaller setting, and really have some of those emotional needs related to that. At $45,000 is the tuition cost for 16-17. All the way up to at CCIU, which is CHAMP, is an autistic support program. Those students require an intensive level of support. They need a one-to-one behavior aid with them all the time, in addition to the teaching support that's there. So that's why that cost is high. And then NHMS is for students who have a lot of needs, related service needs. They're some of them are very medically fragile, so they have a really specialized level of care that's required. So you can see that's $95,900. So I share this with you so that you have a sense of where that money for the out-of-district tuition costs goes. And again, the unpredictable nature of you never know. You can never predict which students are going to be able to return and which students are going to need out-of-district placement. Another important piece that I'll mention is also our requirement for our new students coming in. And so we have new students enroll who require more support than we can provide within our schools, and we need to place them in an out-of-district placement right away when they first come. We have some students who enroll from other local districts that are already in an out-of-district placement, and we have to support that placement initially for those students. So it is a piece of what we do that is unpredictable in some ways. So key influences to summarize, and I feel like I've mentioned these throughout. The federal and state mandates dictate a lot of what we do, and each student's IEP is highly individualized, and that component of it does make it difficult to budget in advance to the dollar. Newly enrolled students and the level of need and support cannot be predicted. And there are cost increases that are beyond our control. We don't have control over tuition and some of the contracted services. Once a student goes into an out-of-district placement, we've made that their placement, and we have to honor that until both the district and the parent agree that that's no longer the appropriate placement. So we're beholden to those out-of-district placements with their tuition costs. Some programs don't get tuition costs to us until August before the school year starts. So in budgeting, we always plan for 3 to 5% increase because we really just don't know what those costs will be. Some expenses not controlled by the district that I just want to highlight that fall under my department. Homebound services for students as determined medically necessary. Sometimes students are going through a situation where their treating physician says they are not medically able to be in school right now, and the district does provide a level of homebound services so that instruction can continue for those students, so that when they're able to return after that short period of time, they're able to pick back up where they left off. So you could see those costs, but we never know what students are going to need that. It is always on a short-term basis, but we don't know in advance. Day treatment facilities, very similar.
Wait, before you go on, what does the 20,000 to 30,000, I don't understand what those numbers are.
Tutoring expenses for the homebound services.
So in total, we spend 20,000 for special education?
That's what's proposed for the 17-18 budget. Mm-hmm. Day treatment facilities. So some students go through needing mental health supports, and if their outside treating team recommends a placement in a day treatment facility or an inpatient facility, the district has no control over that placement. That's being done by their outside treating team, but we are responsible for paying for the educational portion of their stay. So we have to pick up those costs. Charter schools, we have talked about also in previous conversations. Parents have the right to select a charter school. And so we have to pick up a piece of that. For 17-18, we're proposing budgeting $600,000 for special education students. We currently have 9 students enrolled in charter schools that are receiving special educations, to give you an example of the number. Court adjudicated placements we also don't have control over. So unfortunately, if students find themselves in some difficulty with the law and they are in court adjudicated placements, we have to pick up the educational portion of that. And again, the district's not in control of where those students are placed. So I'll end on, you're probably like, oh, thank goodness.
Hold on 1 second. So just to flip back.
Sure.
So for the charter schools, you said there's 9 special education students. So 9 special education students for a total of $60,000? 600,000?
This is what's proposed
This
for
is
the
what's
budget.
proposed. The current tuition rate for a special needs student in a charter school is right around $50,000. 48 or $50,000. So if the student is deemed to need special needs, no matter what those special needs are, it could be special needs in speech, which would, if that were in district, that would be not very intensive, but they get the same $48,000 to $50,000 as a child who would need more intensive special needs. The other part of it that's a concern, at least for me, is that those dollars that are secured by the charter school for under that need not go to special needs students. So that's money that the charter school can use any way they wish.
So we're budgeting for 12.
We are. Because again, so it's another unpredictable piece of our budget. We can't predict how many students. We know historically how many we typically have. We currently have 9. We're budgeting for 12. And I wanted to end on just highlighting for you, again, the services provided through my department really and our team impacts every student. But there are a lot of students in the district who need specialized supports. Almost 40% of students in some way receive some type of specialized support, obviously to varying degrees of what that support looks like. But I think it does speak to what we are providing and the volume of specialized support that is provided.
For clarification on this, if you look at the GIPs, it's shown as 15%, and the IEPs of 504s are 24%, correct? But your budget for special ed is $47 million, and only $3 million is for gifted. So how did it end up being about half of the special ed there?
Well, this is based on the numbers. This isn't the budget. This is the number of students.
Number of students.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
All right.
that's not clear.
Thank you.
Yes, it's the number of students. So 14% of students in the district receive special education services. Yeah, I'm sorry that that's not clear.
So just to continue the summary, a couple points I'll make before we take questions. One of the things that we've heard probably over the last year and a half is people take the number of students we have in the district and divide that into the total budget and say, you spend $30,000 a student, and that's what private schools spend. The concern I have over that is as you've seen, we spend a lot of money providing health services to non-public schools. We spend a significant amount of money spending money on charters. So that's why the simple division issue doesn't work. And that's really just, it's not even an oversimplification, it's I would argue it's a problem. As Kimberly has just said, you've got about 38, close to 40% of all students receiving very specialized services, IEPs, GIPs, 504 plans. It's a lot of specialized services. I doubt seriously whether many of the independent schools are providing those kinds of services. And when you sort of take all that together, I think that's something we just need to consider, and the kinds of services that we provide for students. So I'm sure you all have exciting things. You now know a tremendous amount. You even know what IDEA means, and there are actually people in government who don't. You may.
Yeah, I heard that. Thank you very much, Kim. Very comprehensive. Before I open it up to questions, I just want to make one sort of general request.
Sure.
This is a very comprehensive overview of what you provide, the services the district provides and what have you. But since this is, we are a finance committee focused in this particular meeting, I'd love to see a lot more of the breakout numbers.
Okay.
You gave a lot of them in your commentary, but they're not on the slides. So just to give you a couple quick examples, you have early on you have a slide that has who all the student service team members are, right? And you have this long list. I'd be curious how many we have of each of those, and roughly how much that how much that costs us. So and then again, another slide is, let me find another good example. So under counseling, you have academic advising, personal district testing. You gave us a lot of numbers on the district testing, which are great for this specific meeting. I'd love if you could add them onto the slides so that we can really get a more comprehensive idea of the numbers we're talking about on this. So, so if before we, or if it's already been posted, if we could maybe repost it.
It's not. Vic, how much of that detail will be in the budget book? Well,
it's
so one way or the other, we'll make sure.
yeah. I mean, if you put it in the budget book,
Can I
then
follow
it's.
up with that? That's an issue, because I actually had the same comment. The information is fantastic. It's really detailed information. And I think if you've written, I mean, I saw that you were going through your presentation, when you see the numbers on staffing, even if there's a way, to annotate it somehow, or add a slide afterwards. I mean, I know that you want to keep the slides less for us here, but you could even add that in. And even the numbers on inclusion, like you said, I wrote down 67% of the students. That's a really, I think, important number for people to have. And so even if it means, if it's too crowded on this, if it just makes the slides difficult, even adding a slide after you say it with the actual breakdown, I think would be.
Might be able to put the notes section in.
Or the notes section.
That would be real. I mean, because I know when you do a PowerPoint presentation, you don't want to pack it full
And
of.
it felt like it already was kind
Yeah, but I agree with Melissa completely that, for example, that 67% was a really interesting number. So, yeah, however you can do that so that the detail is there as well. So with that, I'm going to start on this side. Any questions on this side?
That was a very detailed presentation, very educational, actually. Just a couple of quick questions. One, I was curious, some of the guidance department, the psychologists, all that would apply. I mean, some of that budget also would include general education students.
Correct. I think that people often associate my department with just special education, and we are not.
Right. So break out that. So that would be an important, interesting figure to understand how much of your budget actually does cover more than just special needs kids. And that was my first question. The second question was in terms of the IEP teams from building to building to building. Is there a way that you have, you kind of have quality control in terms of, like, if I have a child at Belmont Hills in 3rd grade, that he has the same IEP evaluation, more or less, at Penn Valley that he gets at Belmont Hills? Or how is that sort of overseen?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Again, it's individualized to the student within the building. So even within individual schools, so take Belmont Hills, each student that has an IEP, it's going to look very different because it really depends on what their needs are. I do think that just in terms of what resources are available and what supports are provided, our supervisors are a key role in that. They are in buildings every day, working with teachers, working with teams. Their presence is invaluable in terms of helping our special education, our IEP teams. To say that there would be consistency, I feel is kind of counter to what IEPs really are, which
No,
is
well,
that
you misunderstood my
individualized.
question.
Okay.
I understand that completely and what you're saying, but what I'm only asking is for an individual student, in other words,
Oh.
so that their evaluation in Belmont Hills would be more or less the same as that evaluation in Penn Valley, if you understand what I'm asking. That there's some oversight to make sure that the evaluations are conducted in a consistent way.
Yes,
So that
correct.
for student A in each of the 6 schools, say an elementary school, that they would be evaluated more or less the same.
Yes,
You understand what I'm saying?
correct. Yes, and so that comes down under the leadership of Dr. Whitaker, who oversees directly our school psychologists, who are the lead in that. And again, that administrative support from my district office team is critically important in addressing that.
Great. And one other last quick question. I don't want to monopolize the time. I'm trying to go through fast. But anecdotally, and from friends and things I've read, I understand that it's a tough job, special ed teachers, and especially on the student level. And burnout could be a problem. And I was curious if that's an issue in our district and what kind of supports we're giving for the teachers with regard to being able to go with the long haul, so to speak.
It is, I would say that attrition actually isn't a concern that we face. Our teachers do stay with us for an extended period of time, but I don't want to minimize. It is difficult. The work that they do every day is difficult. We put a lot of supports in place, and again, our administrative team is there in the buildings with them. They're out, they're working with teachers, they're making sure that they feel supported. That's really important to us. We're constantly saying with the professional development that we provide, that the in-building supports that we're providing, it matters to my team a great deal that teachers feel supported, that they know that they can pick up the phone and call any one of us and we'll be right there with them to help them figure it out.
Yeah, I have a question about the behavior specialists. Are those, I guess I want to make sure I understand the term correctly. You said there's 2 from the MCIU and we have the equivalent of a half a person here. And are those the people that would help someone with an emotional disturbance?
So behavior specialists will come in and work with the team so that they assist with doing functional behavior assessments. So the functional behavior assessment is really looking specifically at what are the behaviors of concern, what are the causes of that, the antecedents to that behavior, what are the consequences that are happening, really trying to understand what's driving that behavior, and then also trying to working with the team to say what are the replacement behaviors that we need to see, and they work on developing then from there a plan. So the behavior specialists take a lead role in doing that assessment and then developing that plan, supporting the team with developing the tools to monitor a student's progress on that, and then checking back in with the team, reviewing the data. Is what we're doing working? What other strategies do we need to put into place? So they're not just working with students that have emotional disturbance. They're working with any identified students who are exhibiting behaviors of control, behaviors of concern. It typically is students requiring emotional support and autistic support services, but not always.
So for the 500 kids with an diagnosed emotional disturbance, who's working with them?
Well, it depends on their level of need. So they all have a special education case manager. For some of our students, that level of support is sufficient.
Okay.
Other students might need, I referenced that we have some students that need one-to-one support. That might be
So
an
that wouldn't be
instructional
included.
assistant. That's a behavior support, that's support for the behavior.
Okay.
It also is about the accommodations that you put in place within the educational setting that
Okay.
serves as behavioral supports.
Okay. And then just the other question is on slide 19, the out-of-district placements. I know the state wants you to reduce the number of out-of-district placements, and compliance is not my concern. I don't think it should be a driver. So I'm trying to figure out why we believe decreasing this number is a positive for the district.
Right. Beyond compliance.
Yeah, I
It talks
can-
to our program development. It talks to students being able to stay in their home school with their community friends. That's what it speaks to.
So-
It's not appropriate for every student. I know that I've said that. We know that some students will require more services than we can provide. I do view that as a positive because it means that more students are here in our home schools.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for the presentation. On slide 3 or 4, you had the first pie chart. I was curious, oh, Vic is leaving. I'm going to hold my question until Vic is back, because I think it's a question more for him than it is for you.
Good.
Sorry.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It was really, very helpful to get a kind of comprehensive overview. I have, a second, I'm trying to, I know what I wanted to ask. So there was one point where you discussed the psychologists who would do evaluations over the summer and sort of kind of catch up, or it just seems to be there's so many that need to be done, and you were saying it gets stopped, the clock kind of gets stopped over the summer, but people are still working. Correct. And you said that the psychologists are on 10-month salaries and we're paying, I'm assuming you've thought this all through, but I'm just going to ask you the question, which is, does it make sense to have some psychologists on 12-month as opposed to doing it the way we're doing it? I'm assuming that you've discussed this and figured this out, but I'm just curious.
It is on our mind always, yes.
Yeah,
It seems like it's just, it's obviously.
There's a break point, because at some point, when you go 12 months, you give vacations. And so you have to decide where you want to go. Is it better to simply pay a per diem, or is it better to create a full-time?
Okay, so you're thinking about these things obviously all the time.
Too much.
Okay.
And we are closely with Dr. Whitaker being part of our team. We are closely monitoring that workload of our school psychologists. We're always looking at, are we being most effective in our use of funds in the way that we're accomplishing the work? Mm-hmm. We are closely watching it.
Okay, and then I have another question about how we're calculating some of these costs, because I know that with all of the IEP and GIEP meetings, when you bring the teams in, you're also bringing, teachers in, and so I'm assuming that at that time, the teachers are not in their classrooms with other students, and you're having to bring in
Sub-coverage.
some coverage. So is that sort of just built into our system of knowing how many kind of substitutes that I'm just curious how you actually figure that out, and is that included? I realize this is supposed to be focused on finance and not other issues at this point, or that's the main focus of it, but I'm just curious, like, how do you actually?
I don't think you added it to your cost, did you, for the meeting?
Vic can explain. The sub-coverage is separate.
Yeah, I think it gets subsumed into the sub-budget and is not necessarily carved out specifically for that.
So do we have substitute teachers, not just for, like, if a teacher calls out sick, we also have substitutes who are in the building because we know we're constantly having these meetings? Is that how that works?
Boy, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? One of the
Megan's looking at
challenges.
The look on her face is like, that's a great idea.
Well, one of the, right,
Yeah.
and so are a lot of holidays. The reality is that Lower Merion, along with pretty much everybody in Pennsylvania, is dealing with a lack of people in substitute
that's what I was
coverage.
wondering.
So our sub-coverage rates are really low. So that concept, my guess is at the secondary level, somebody may be covering the class who's got a duty period. At the elementary,
They try to fill within that's how they manage it.
and I think they probably try and schedule it around the teacher's planning time if they can.
Correct. Deb, I don't know if you have any insight on how they do it at the elementary level. You got a pressure button.
What we'll do at the elementary levels, we do have, a lot of our instructional assistants are certified teachers. So they'll step in for maybe an hour to cover the class, and then that'll be part of the class coverage while a teacher's in an IEP meeting, and then their salary switches up during the day.
Okay, and then I have just can I ask one more question and then I'll stop. It's around, I know that for students who need to take medicine, and I'm assuming it's for other issues as well, and I think you mentioned it require nurses during like field trips and those kinds of things. So are those being covered by the nurses that we have in the building, or are we having to bring in other people? I'm just curious.
Terry's
about
our
that.
organizer of all that.
Yeah.
We do try to bring in subs for that, but we're not very successful. So we usually manage that with our internal staff.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Vic, I'm sorry, this one's more for you. Like slide 3 or 4 was the first pie chart, and I think it showed your expenditures so my question is, we've been, for state aid, what, the 3.5 million, I think that only goes to the dark blue section of that pie chart. Not this one, could you go back to, I think it's 3 or 4,
It's
please.
slide 4,
Slide,
I think, is the one we're referring to.
and we lost.
Did it go off?
Mm-hmm. Let's see if it comes back.
Right, so I think it goes in the section where she has special education. It doesn't go towards any of the other.
Oh, hit the mic, please.
Right, yeah, so the amount of state subsidy is special education for students who have special needs. So really, it's the 47 minus the 3 million for gift that comes out. So it's like 44 million where you're getting roughly like $3 million or so, depending upon the formula.
So my follow-up to that is the other pieces of the chart. Do you know off the top of your head how much, if any, state aid we would get for the health services, the council? I mean,
Health service is about 240,000. We don't get anything for clinical services or for counseling.
So these numbers are budgeted numbers, not net numbers?
These are budgeted expenditure numbers for 17-18.
Yeah.
So to Ben's point, that 47 would be less, roughly 3 million?
If you look
On the
at,
other side of the.
if you look at Vic's slides on revenue that we do in the major that's where you'll see those numbers.
I had a point that you've mentioned before around that I just want to highlight, which was that when I believe it was the county sort of had less services around for students who had substance abuse issues, we as a school district decided to hire counselors for that purpose because there was less from, assistance outside. I don't know if
This was before my time.
it was before, but I'm
The mental
That was-
health, the mental health counselors provide a significant support for.
right, but
for those
because
services.
the county was providing less services at that time, we actually hired additional services so that, because we were concerned because our students weren't getting access to services that they needed quickly enough outside the school. So I think I just want to, that we've made a real sort of commitment to providing those services for students, and I think that's important to say.
Okay, board members, any other questions? Any additional?
I
Do you
do
have
have a
another?
follow-up.
Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Staying on this slide, to the extent, obviously, special education has increased the cost of it over the last decade or so, and state aid, as Vic has said, has remained relatively flat. To the best you can describe at the very high level, I don't believe special education today, how we review it, how we deliver it, is what it was even 10 years ago. I think that we have made advances in all forms of education, and I think that's,
Agreed.
I don't know if you can speak to something that kind of, because I have that sense that even though the numbers of students needing it is increasing, it's not just that, it's what we deliver for those students that is partially driving these costs.
Yeah, and I'll take you back to that 67% at the itinerant level. We have such a commitment to inclusion, such a commitment to access to that general education curriculum and that general education setting, that of course does come at a cost, but we do believe in ensuring those outcomes for our students with disabilities. So it does come with the cost of what services we provide so they're able to access.
But to your point, the delivery of special needs has been dramatic over the last 40 years. The original federal law, Public Law 94-192, came out about 1975, and it said, and what it said was you're segregating kids too much. You're just putting them somewhere, and you're not allowing them to have access to the general curriculum that every other kid is going to. And so steadily over the years, as the public laws have been reenacted or reauthorized, there's been more and more of a call. And to speak to the issue of bringing kids back. So the example I would give is bringing students who are 18 to 21 years old, instead of going to the MCIU, being educated as close to their home schools, just like everybody else, is the goal. And that's been the overall driver. You combine that with the fact that we know more. Assistive technology provides opportunities for kids that they didn't have, back then. And back then, I was around back then. So, so it's with everything. We've gotten better at it, and I think the district, as I said at one of the budget presentations, I think should be proud of the services and the programs that are provided.
One thing I'd like to mention too with the special education piece, I've been here 20 years, so I've seen it change over time. The children that are coming into special education are much more significantly delayed. The increase in autistic population that has come into the district is immense. I mean, 20 years ago, I had one class, and now we have classes in every one of the buildings in Lower Merion. The people that move to our district, our hospitals and colleges, I mean, they look around the country, they see where they can get their jobs, and then they look for, a school district that has the supports that we have in Lower Merion. So, and then also the survival rate of children has increased over time. So the babies that are being born with significant inabilities to be able to function are increasing across the country. So all of those are extreme factors that I've seen just over the 20 years that I've been here. You're welcome.
One thing that I was going to say, and it ties in rather nicely, is special education. I view special education services even more than general education services as an investment in the future, because I look at if a student with Down syndrome when I was in school was institutionalized for their whole life they were institutionalized. Then I think of this student with Down syndrome who lives across the street, or who used to live across the street from me, who receives services through the school district, and that person's working. And they were at the same level of disability as the student with Downs, 30, 40 years ago. But because we've spent the time, and made the effort to educate them and to provide them with opportunities, all of a sudden, instead of costing society money, they're contributing to society. And I just think it's really important for us to remember that it's a long-term investment.
Just wanted to particularly thank the health services team. I think when you're parenting, you hit different things, you experience different things as your kids get older, and I have a house with 4 teenagers in it right now, and I've had a parade of kids with some pretty serious issues whose primary support has come from the school. And like Diane said, I think it's a really important investment that we've decided to make, and I'm shocked that you're delivering what you're delivering with the number of people that you seem to have, which is why I'm asking. I feel like I'm missing something, because these kids are going to their guidance counselor saying another kid seems like they're in trouble, and there's a response and a follow-up and a long-term plan. And I know it's made a really big difference in some kids in my kitchens. So I just wanted to thank you all for that.
Okay, since we're done with board questions, are there any questions from the folks who've come to the meeting? Sure. If you'll come up, you need to use the microphone, you need to introduce yourself and tell us generally where you live. And the one thing I will say about special education meetings in general is just be careful you don't want to, if you know, sometimes people tend to share a lot about their own child, and so I just give you a heads up on that.
Not to worry, but I can't come to a school board meeting and not speak. So,
if you would just introduce yourself.
Daniel Moraine from Wynwood. I guess I tie everything back to the issue that everybody knows I'm quite passionate about. The one thing I would recommend. And I think everybody kind of touched on it in different ways, but I don't think anybody said it clearly, and so I'll do it, is as we look at the dollar number divided by the students, and you provide a presentation like this, which is a finance presentation, I think it's extremely important when talking about cost only to speak about cost as compared to. And I think that that's one thing where we have, or where there could be more clarity, because that also would take these anecdotal examples of great success and show that people are that the programs are being viewed not spending is not a measure of quality. So you need to take that spending and then take it one more step and say, versus another public school district versus other situations, this is how we compare ourselves, and these are the successes that we have or not. Because I think that I believe strongly that there are tremendous successes, that the improvements have been dramatic. But when you only speak about spending, I think it actually can be counterproductive if you don't compare it. And the one other thing that I would more specifically is I think in certain areas I think it's relatively simple, like in IEPs, the kids get tested, reading scores, math scores, that type of stuff. I wonder on the GIEP side, that might be an area to look at more carefully, to see what are the success factors of the program, beyond the individual parent's satisfaction with the GIEP or not, and to see how that is really playing out. So I think that there's part of these things that are easily quantifiable and comparable, and I think you should do that, because I do believe in my heart that what is being provided is above quality. I think that's why parents are moving to the district. I think they do see the quality of the services as compared to other districts. And I think that if we want to be proud of something, we should be, but we should also explain it, because I think that by not comparing it, or by not giving some sort of the flip side of this, like not just we're spending, but this is what we're getting for our spending. As I said, I always say, like I said, cost is not a measure of quality. So that's my positive view, and then I can make other comments about other things later, I guess. So.
Actually respond to that, because
Bob, you want to go first?
No.
my concern about this is that this is, it's a finance meeting, and so, so I chair curriculum meetings, and it's in curriculum meetings where we talk a lot about, the kinds of issues that you're talking about, not in terms of comparison side, but in terms of like, what are the programs doing and what are we achieving? And in fact, we're having a program evaluation of gifted education that's ongoing now. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't want you to think that we're not actually looking at, are we doing this well, and what are the impacts, and what could we do better? I'm not sure. I take your point of having a finance committee meeting and not discussing those things, and so I do, and I agree with what you're saying, but I just want to make sure that it's clear that we are actually talking about these issues in other meetings. So.
No, I think that's great. I think that's great. I think the one thing is that I worry about putting this online, and then not having that other piece to it.
Yeah, no, I
because
hear what you're
then it
saying.
just it kind of creates, it's a fifth of the budget, right? So and I think it's something successful and good, and that,
Yeah. No,
and so I think even if gross measures of, I don't know if the state does some stuff, even if it's not every part of it, but if you can point to on one slide, 5 or 6 things where, it's really positive, it doesn't have to be everything, then at least it provides that, okay, we
No,
spent
and that's
this,
a great suggestion,
but
and I think especially.
here is some of this.
No, I
And,
think
and
that-
I'm not saying in depth, none of that. I just, I just can see how this might play without that counterpoint.
No, that's a good
Do we
point.
have let me just ask a question as part of this. Do we have do we have a sense for how many special education students go on to higher education?
We do. I don't have those numbers here,
I mean,
but
is that the
yes, we
kind of
do.
thing?
That would be exactly the ideal. And then if you look at, 2 or 3 other districts where the famous number divided by the students is different, then that would be a great point, right? And you need 1 or 2 of those things, and that's it, you're done.
So we've looked at that. There's a program that we've purchased that allows us to make some comparisons. The problem is much of what happens, well, virtually all of what happens in the program is self-reported. And this speaks to, frankly, the complexity of the difficulty, and I would argue the danger of comparing one district to another. So, for instance, we looked at guidance counselors, and we see that our ratio for students to guidance counselors is significantly below the state, was the lowest of neighboring districts, not by a huge amount, but was the lowest. But then you look and you look at some categories, and you'll say, well, District XY has no nurses? How could they have no nurses? Well, they didn't populate the cell or whatever, so it throws everything off. And so without sort of almost doing audit by audit to the district, it's almost impossible, except on some very large things. Now, when it comes to enrollment, that's why we were able to show the enrollment slides that we did for that, because that's the kind of granular thing. But we were having a difficult time going through it and getting something that we could feel was a true comparison, because the districts are not populating them the same way. One person's calling it a dean of students, another person's calling it an assistant principal, and when you try and collect the data, it doesn't shake out as neatly. So we have been looking at that, and we will try and look at comparisons where we have a fairly good feeling that we're really being honest in our comparisons.
Can I just follow up with a question on that? I think people in a field, when they go to conferences, there's a way you talk and a way you compare yourselves, and that is something that I'm completely unaware of in this field. So how, in the realm of student services, how do people generally measure their success? We're talking about comparing dollars, which is a little bit different than talking about successes. I don't know how people even talk about that in terms of special education, gifted education, mental health.
Right. You look at the access, that piece of inclusion is critically important. The outcomes of our students with disabilities is important. Like, are we helping them to achieve those transition goals that they have for themselves? So that's a measure of that. The continuum of services within the district, what we're able to provide, and talking about that's a big one. I mean, and that, again, ties back to the inclusion and students being able to get the services in their home school.
She said our relationships with the parents for those people. But you didn't turn your mic on.
Another thought, we have a group of students who we continue to educate through age 21. And those students generally have fairly significant needs, just in terms of navigating day-to-day life. Do we have a sense of how many of those students eventually end up placing into jobs? Is that a number we could get a hold of?
Yes, we could To a certain degree, yes, we could gather that information. Those are typically our students who are going into either a supported work. It might not be competitive employment. Some
Right.
students go into a supported work environment. Some do go on to competitive employment. Some go on to other vocational training programs.
So, one thing that we might be able to say is, you know, I'll call it positive placement for lack of a better term, but for our students that we've educated through age 21, is there something we can say about positive placements afterwards? To your point, just to give context. The other thought that I had has to do with students with autism, and that's difficult because there's such a continuum. I mean, it's unbelievable just the range, but I'd be curious as to how many students with autism we educate in district as opposed to out of district, compared perhaps to how other districts handle it. So I don't know if that's a good benchmark or not, because of the range of definition for
Yeah,
where someone falls on
there's so
that
many
spectrum.
variables. There's so many variables.
But that's a good example, if I'm not sure, even if we could collect it, what it would say.
Right, right.
But you,
I-
yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
you go
But to that point, so for instance, I think if you can't compare yourself to other districts, then show over time. So in other words, if you can show, go back 5 years or 10 years and see how those, that success or those number of people have gotten jobs and how how they've improved, because you must have some metrics that you're using to measure the success of your program. So it's just a matter of, even if you're not comparing yourself to somebody else, I think it'd be helpful when showing a fifth of the spending to show some of the metrics or improvements, or even the maintenance under tremendous increase in students of the quality. In other words, but I think by giving it context beyond spending, then I think it makes the overall discussion of budget a lot easier.
But I was thinking about situation again, and I don't actually usually talk about my kids, but my son in 4th grade had a concussion, a very severe concussion. He was out of school for over 6 weeks in the middle of the year, right? And Terry will remember that. The services that he got, that he was, connected with through MCIU and, the group that comes in to do the assessment, it was really incredible. Frankly, it was just incredible. And of course, you're in the middle of that and you don't know what you're doing. No one sort of prepares you to deal for that situation. And, I was talking to somebody at work who later had, who had a child who had a concussion in school, and they weren't given any access to those types of services. And I just don't know, and concussions, which is not obviously special education, although he actually had to have a 504 at that point in order to be able to deal with it, on a temporary basis. I believe that from what I've heard, the number of children with concussions that are actually, diagnosed and becoming, more impactful for whatever reason, has gone through the roof as well. So I just, I'm not sure. I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure how we do that, because that's just one specific example that I happen to.
I think one of the things that we tried to do was to tell a story, and was to tell a story about not just what the numbers were, but about the services delivered, and to demonstrate that the dollars are going towards the needs of kids. And that's the overall story. It's and we look, believe me, we look for ways to show some comparisons so that we can have some metrics that say, here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing. One of the, I don't know how you measure this. You've got regular ed teachers who are as involved and as accessible to special needs students as anyone else. Now, if you've been around as long as I have and remember when mainstreaming was the thing in the 1970s and people had to be cajoled into having students with special needs in their class, and to see what's happened now, I'm not sure how I'd measure that except to say it's a different world. I can also tell you, as someone who spends time, with talking to people who have my job, I think that there's a significant investment in all kids in this district that is different from other places. And now, how do I measure that? It's what I see and what I feel.
I know, but I think to your point, I think you could actually measure that relatively easy, right? Because GIPs and IEPs are reported to the state, right? And people report their student special services budget. So you can just take the number of kids, divide it out, and do the same for other districts.
But that contradicts your initial statement, which is money is not the
No, I know, but at least it shows. I mean, trust me, I don't even want to go there. But if you guys are saying that, I'm just trying to move beyond the cost in any, or even compare costs.
Yeah, I think we get the point, and I think we'll see if we can come up with some ideas. Okay. So thank you very much for sharing that.
But I have to your point, and it is a little, this isn't apples to apples, but like there has been conversations I'm reading that some of the charter schools may actually, give their students some form of a disability or something to collect the bigger paycheck. So a school that is, and again, a charter school that's over-reporting may not actually be providing the services it's providing. It may not be delivering. It just wants the paycheck. So the difficulty of how any individual school, granted, and you heard Kimberly say that, that's Dr. Whitaker's primary responsibility to make our schools are across the board equal. They shouldn't be, Belmont Hills shouldn't be much different than Marion or vice versa. But when you go over to another district, that kind of oversight doesn't really exist. So is that district 2 townships over evaluating students the same way we are? Does it view what it should do for inclusive the same way we do? And then that's where I just think it gets tricky to do that kind of comparison. And it's just how my observation on it. That's
okay. Any other questions? Nothing from you? Do you have something on a different topic?
Yeah.
I know everyone's kicking me under the table. No, but
41. So
but
I'll have to go home tomorrow.
Trust me, it was a hard thing to get here tonight. But well, in general, I wanted to come and basically for the people not in this room once again. I wanted to just speak about the budget and the lawsuit. And I think that the lawsuit, once again, I would call on the plaintiffs to remove the lawsuit against the school district and instead engage in discussion to try to make the school district more efficient and stop distracting the administrators and the groups in the community from the important issues, I think, of figuring out how to make the school district the best that it can be and not trying instead to get a tax break. I think that, the best way, this is a class action lawsuit. It represents potentially everybody in the district if the class action is certified. And so I think that, in speaking for the 3,000 people that have signed the Save Lmsb petition, we really think that the election has spoken. And what better way than to show that the people of Lower Merion Township support what the board is doing and the type of education that the teachers and the administrators are providing, and therefore we don't think that the will of a few people should be imposed through some legal technicalities onto what is clearly the view of the majority of the electorate in Lower Merion Township. And so I think that's basically all we had to say. But we really think that this lawsuit at this point is counterproductive to trying to make the schools efficient and improve the quality of education in Lower Merion Township.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, Kim. Thank you, folks, for coming out, being here. And with that, we're adjourned. Thanks.